You have questions about running the Dopey Challenge, and today we are going to answer them. I'm Dr. Amy Konvalin with Physical Therapy for Everybody, and I am currently training for my first Dopey Challenge. And I decided to create this series because I realized that there was a lot of challenging information out there, and people had a lot of questions. Now, it is challenging to answer all of your questions because everybody is different, and what works for me may not work for you. So I will try to answer them in the best way I can, but first I want to give you kind of my lens that I am training through and that I see the world through. First thing is, I usually run half marathons, 1 to 2 races a year. So I am in what I call half marathon shape. So that means I can go out and run a half marathon tomorrow without too much difficulty. My husband likes to say, your buddy calls you up and is like, hey, I have a free race entry into a race on Saturday. Do you want to do it? It's a half marathon. And you say, sure, yeah, I can definitely do that, because you know you're going to finish. It may not be your best race. You may be sore, tired afterwards, but basically you can do it. The next thing is, I am a firm believer that you need to run the distance of your longest race. So with the Dopey Challenge, that longest race is a marathon, and I firmly believe that you need to run 20 to 24 miles for your long run a couple of times before you get to that start line. Now, I know that this is controversial and a lot of people have different points of view on this, and this may not be what works best for your body. But again, this is my lens on the world. You want to be in half marathon shape, and you want to have run 20 to 24 miles to make sure that you've covered that distance. All right. With that caveat out of the way, I hope that you can understand the lens that I see the world through, and I hope that that will help you to interpret the answers to these questions. Because again, this is my opinion. There are lots of opinions out there, and you may feel differently for your body. So you ready for the questions? The first question I often get asked is, do I have to train multiple days in a row? Now, if you are doing the Dopey Challenge, which is 4 races over 4 days, yes, I strongly believe that you need to be running 4 days in a row at least every other week. And that's how my training program is designed. So we have every other week, we run 4 days in a row for basically the entire second half of the program. I believe strongly that you want to get your body used to running multiple days in a row so that it can keep going even when it's tired. In fact, we actually did our first 4-day in a row week the same week that we had scheduled to do a half marathon race. And we were a little concerned when we showed up for the half marathon because this was our 4th day in a row, kept telling ourselves it's just a training run. You don't have to run fast. It's just a training run. We actually did really, really well. And I think that that's because we are in training. We have been doing a lot of distance. We have been working on our nutrition and our hydration and our sleep and been getting everything in line to make sure that we were successful. So I definitely think that that's what helped us be successful in that race. And we actually both got personal records. And it gave us a huge amount of confidence that we can actually do the Dopey Challenge and run 4 days in a row. The next question I get asked is, how long should my long run be? And as I mentioned previously, I am a firm believer that your long run should be between 20 and 24 miles. I think this is super important because you want to make sure that you have done that distance before you get out on that course. It's very intimidating to be standing at the start line for a marathon and wondering if you can actually finish it. So it's nice to have that in your mind, like, hey, I've already done 20 miles. I've already done 22. I've already done 24. And it helps you when you're dealing with that mental game to be able to get started. Because I don't believe that pixie dust can carry you 26.2 miles, but I definitely do believe that pixie dust can carry you the last couple of miles. The next question I get asked is, what do I do about the soreness after long runs? Now, there are lots of techniques to deal with soreness, and I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of different ones. You have to find the techniques that work for you, but I definitely encourage you to spend time doing it now because you're going to want those during the race as well. And I do want to make sure that you do address that soreness, because for us on our training program, our long runs are on Saturday. Sunday's a rest day, so that's a recovery day where you actually get to do some of this recovery stuff. But Monday, we're back at it and we're running a medium distance. So if you go out and run a long distance and don't recover properly, when Monday comes around, your run's probably not going to be that great and your body's not going to feel good. That's when you are more risk for an injury, because you haven't taken the time to rest properly or do the recovery that your body needs to get you ready for the next run. A couple of things that you can try, depending on what you have access to, is spending some time in the hot tub. And definitely while you're in there, I would encourage you to do some stretching. In fact, this weekend, we were actually at a place where I had access to a hot tub. So the day after my long run, I got in the hot tub, I did some stretching, and then I noticed that my left foot was feeling a little tight. It was my toes were actually kind of going into this like claw type formation, which is not good. And so I did some massage through my feet to make sure that they lengthened out. So when I got to my long run on Monday, they were feeling much better. Now, I also find swimming to be a great cross-training exercise as well as a recovery exercise. Now, obviously, if I'm using it for cross-training, I'm trying to get more of that cardio workout, whereas if I'm using it for recovery, it's just doing what feels good in my body. So doing some breaststroke, doing just some crawl or freestyle swimming really helps to get everything kind of moving around, decreases the tension in my body for me, as well as gets my hips moving, which are one of my biggest issues, especially with those long runs. Now, if swimming is really stressful for you, then I don't encourage that as a recovery type activity because it's not going to help. But what you could do is you could go walking in the pool, or you could even go into the pool and do like some leg lifts and some stretching. Again, just being in that different environment can help to calm your body down. However, I would not recommend swimming for you if it's not relaxing and a good recovery exercise. And cold plunge has become all the rage for recovery. And I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of the cold plunge because I just don't like being cold. However, if there's a sauna nearby, I can definitely do the cold plunge. So what I'll do is I'll go into the sauna for 30 minutes, get all of that feeling good, nice and warm. Then I can tolerate a cold plunge for about a minute. I don't cold plunge for very long, like a minute is my max because I just can't tolerate it that long. But it definitely does feel better. I gotta say my muscles feel way more relaxed after I'm done with the sauna and the cold plunge. But again, it's only what you can tolerate. If you can't tolerate the heat of the sauna or the cold of the cold plunge, this may not be the best plan for you, but it is something to think about if you can. Obviously, you want to be doing some stretching, and particularly to those areas in your body that tend to carry your stress. So again, for me, my stress areas are my hips. They get really, really tight and then they can't activate properly, which means my run time goes down. So that's something I'm working on right now, is making sure that they stay nice and loose. Obviously, your calves and your feet, you want to make sure stay flexible, but I would encourage you to consider your upper body as well, particularly your shoulders and your neck. For some people, when they're running longer distances, they start to use those accessory muscles of respiration. So their neck and their shoulders get really, really tight. And then if that happens, you go for your next long run, those muscles will start to kick in automatically and you won't be getting that deep diaphragmatic breathing. So I highly encourage you to make sure that you're stretching your shoulders, your upper back, to make sure that you're getting that proper breathing pattern and using that diaphragm when you're breathing. And if you feel like you can't get a good enough stretch on your own, I highly recommend finding a good stretch therapist. Having a good stretch therapist really stretch you out after a long run is amazing. And I admit, I thought the whole thing was kind of ridiculous initially until I tried it after a long run. And it's fantastic. It really helps with getting that good stretch. Now, you got to find someone who you can work with well and who understands that you're in training, because your muscle tension will feel a little bit different based on where you are in your training. But I highly recommend finding someone who you can work with, and I would get stretch the day after a long run to help keep you nice and flexible and ready for your next run. And many people have asked me if a massage will be helpful in order to recover from those long runs. Personally, for me, I have found the stretch therapy to be more helpful than a massage for recovery. However, if you don't have a stretch therapist in your area, or if you already have a massage therapist who you're working with, who you feel really confident in, then I would go ahead and do the massage. Again, everybody's different in what they can tolerate and what feels good for their body. A massage is not a bad idea. I guarantee you it's going to help those muscles feel better, and it will help you to recover quicker. I just prefer the stretch therapy over the massage for my body. Another thing that's gaining a lot of popularity is doing an IV drip after a long run, or sometimes even before a long run. And I've heard of people scheduling them after the half marathon in order to prepare for the marathon. Now, to be fair, I have not tried that, so I cannot speak directly to it, but the whole thing makes a lot of sense to me. If you do it after the half marathon, you're going to make sure that you're well hydrated going into that marathon. And if I were going to do an IV drip, I would do it before the long run as opposed to after, to set you up for success. It's always harder to recover than it is to be proactive. So if I were going to do an IV drip, I would do it before long run, or during the Dopey, I would do it after the half marathon. But again, I wouldn't try anything the weekend of. I would want to make sure during training that I didn't have a problem with it. But if you have tried an IV drip while you're training, I would definitely love to hear more about that and about your experience with that. The next question I get asked a lot is, what do I do if I have an injury? Now, this is a difficult question because it really depends on the injury, but here's kind of a general guideline that I recommend. First, if you can put your finger on it, chances are good that it's actually a muscle. And so you can massage it out, you can use a massage gun on it, and then you can stretch it, which will help to relieve the injury or pain. Now, you may need to take a day or two off from running to let that muscle fully recover, because if it's been super tight and then you massaged it and now it's relaxed, it may not be able to contract and relax normally for 24 to 48 hours. So if it was really, really bad, I definitely recommend taking a bit of time off, a day or two, to make sure that that muscle has fully recovered. In fact, last week, my husband went to do his long run. His calf tightened up. It just went into spasm, which is a problem he's had in the past. And he was able to get home, and he did his exercises and his stretches and his racquetball and all the things that his PT wife has told him to do afterwards. And the next day he was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to finish that long run today. And I was like, no, you're not. You're going to take a day, you're going to walk around, you're going to make sure that calf is contracting and relaxing. Then you're going to do the racquetball and the stretches and all of those things again. And if everything feels okay tomorrow, so 48 hours after initial injury, then you can go finish that long run. Well, my husband is such a smart person. He actually listened to his PT wife, and he did wait 48 hours, and he went out and he had 10 miles to finish that day, and he was able to do it and had no problems at all with his calf. So for him, in that case, I could be really, really specific because I've worked on that calf before and I know that calf's history. So for him, I was like, no, you need that full 48 hours. Also, we are right in the middle of training, and I knew that if he went back out and hurt it again, he was then going to have to take an entire week off of training. So if it's your first time, I would definitely recommend 24 to 48 hours to make sure that it's fully healed before continuing on with your training. It may mean that you miss a day. It may mean that you have to stack some runs together. It's more important to make sure you recover properly so you can finish that training and have a great Dopey. Now, what if your pain is something that's deep? You can't put your finger on it because it feels like it's way down deep in there. In that case, I want you to be icing it for 5 minutes every hour during the day that you're able to put some ice on it. And I want you to wait that full 48 hours before trying to run again. And the only reason why you would try to run again is because everything was feeling better. If you're icing for 5 minutes every hour for 48 hours and you feel like it has not touched the pain, then I'd highly recommend you seek the help of a specialist, because you need to understand what has actually happened and if it's safe for you to run again. In some cases, you can run through the pain, and sometimes things will actually loosen up as you run, but some things cannot be run through the pain. You're actually causing more damage and putting more of a delay into your training. It's difficult from this far away to know exactly what you should be doing because your situation is special and unique to you, but that is my general recommendation. If you can put your finger on it, massage it, rest for 24 to 48 hours. If you can't put your finger on it, ice it and rest for 48 hours. And if after 48 hours you don't feel like you're on the mend, seek the help of a specialist so you can learn what's going on with your body and what is specifically safe for you. All right. The next question I get asked is a fantastic question, especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest, where we tend to run a lot on trails and not so much on pavement. And that question is, what surfaces should I be training on? Friends, this is Disney World. You are going to be running on pavement the entire time. I know sometimes there's like some grassy areas that you can kind of run through a little bit just to give your feet and your legs a break from all of that concrete. And I guarantee you, you will see me on those grassy surfaces because I am used to trail running. However, when I'm doing those longer distances, I'm also making sure to get some pavement in because the entire race is on pavement. And let me tell you, your legs are going to get tired of being on that same surface. That's actually what I struggled with most in the marathon, I think, is that I didn't have any change in surface, which I am used to for my long runs here in the Pacific Northwest. So make sure that you are getting some miles on pavement. And this includes you, treadmill runners. I understand we're getting into winter and it's going to be harder to get those miles in outside potentially. And it's okay to do some of the miles on treadmill. Like, I got no problem with a treadmill. However, you need to make sure you get some miles in on concrete because that's what you're going to be running in Disney. Which leads to the next question of, should I train for hills? Now, this is really dependent on where you live. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, there's nowhere to run that there's not some kind of hills. And you actually will probably hit more hills during your training than you will during the race. Because you see, the only hills in Disney World are overpasses. So you may have to run up an overpass and then back down. For those who are used to training on hills, that is fantastic. However, if you live somewhere like in the South where it's just flat, 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 that hill could be a killer for you. And you'll probably be looking at me as I'm running up the hill going, wee, look, a hill. Which, yeah, I literally do that. And you'll be like, that girl is crazy. So yes, I admit that I'm crazy. It's just nice to have something different every once in a while. So if you're used to training on flat, flat, flat surfaces, I highly recommend throwing in a little bit of a hill to make sure that you get that training. Now, if you live somewhere where there are a lot of hills, I highly recommend trying to find as flat of a surface as you can so you're used to just chugging out those miles. And as we get into winter, a lot of people ask me, should I train in the rain? And I would highly encourage you to train in the rain, specifically in your gear, because you never know what the weather is going to be like in January in Florida, and it could be raining. You want to make sure that you run with those socks and those shoes in the rain, or even that costume. So should you go outside and train in the rain, I highly encourage it. That way, at least you've had a chance to try it, to check out your gear, and make sure that you're gonna be safe for the Dopey. And the last question that I commonly get asked, especially after what happened in Disneyland a couple weeks ago, is how do I train for the possible heat in Florida? And this is challenging if you're coming from a colder climate like we have here in Washington State, which is why I made sure I did all of my gear check running while it was warmer, because I'm planning on running in a warmer climate than what I'm used to. So you want to make sure that you have gotten some runs in that warmer weather. You want to make sure that you've got your hydration on point, as well as knowing what you're going to do on the course and off the course. Because as we saw in Disneyland a couple weeks ago, it was way hotter than anybody had expected. And it was really a problem because they ran out of hydration, the aid stations were full. So make sure you're thinking about that. Like, how am I going to take care of myself? Of course, Run Disney is going to be out there to support you as much as they can. But if it's really hot and a lot of people are coming from colder areas, it is going to be challenging for them to accommodate to everyone. So make sure you've thought about that beforehand. That's why for the half marathon and the marathon, I'm going to make sure I'm carrying as much hydration as I can to make sure I don't have to rely as much on what's on course. So there are the frequently asked questions I have gotten to date. And if I didn't answer your question, I'm going to ask you to drop a comment below and I'll make another FAQ Dopey Challenge video.